everyone, welcome to episode 231 of Rush Roundtable. Today we are talking the fourth track from 2002's Vapor Trails. The track is Peaceable Kingdom. So today on the panel we have Paul Simon, we have Eric, Rob, and my brother from New Brunswick, from another mother, of course, Tim. So it's really important to know that, if you do enjoy our roundtables and our content, to please subscribe or tip us on Ko-fi if you can, via the link in the description below. And also, we have some sponsors that we'll put down below, so we ask you to support them. That would be greatly appreciated. Therefore, let's kick off the fourth track from Vapor Trails with the intro. Interesting introduction. Gentlemen, who wants to start? Who wants to kick us off today?
Wave Towards the Clearing Sky. Kind of featured in the tarot card for the tower. And also, of course, it's been alluded to, and actually I think it was Ryan's pick on the deep dive for this record, about the people who are in the tower waving in, try to get attention, with all the smoke and everything else that was coming out of the Twin Towers. So that's kind of like, that's little, the way it's kind of even recorded, the vocal quality is very, very muffled. I think it's kind of done on purpose and to reflect the events of that day. So I think that's kind of how it sort of opens up. It's that sort of plea a little bit too.
See, and I read it as when you wave smoke away, trying to clear it. Yep. So could go either way.
Yep.
But we know the song, the lyrics were inspired by the events of 9/11 for anyone just tuning in who isn't aware of that. So it did start off. Didn't this start off as an instrumental and then Neil got the sudden inspiration?
Yeah, I think I might have a quote about that from Alex. Yeah, this is a quote from Alex. It's from an article by Paul Canton. Everything was written by this point. The last song that needed to be finished was Peaceable Kingdom. It was already written and slated to be an instrumental song when Paul Northfield, the co-producer for the album, said, "You guys are nuts if you make this an instrumental song. You should really come up with some good lyrics for this." Neil gave it some thought, and what happened on September 11th, that was really a direct result of that, and he wrote the lyrics the following week. So that's a quote from Alex. So it was a pretty, instant reaction to the events of 9/11.
Very cool.
As mentioned too, was a later track on the record. Freeze was the other song that was a little bit later and towards the end of the whole experience of recording the record. So it's definitely a later track.
But the intro is very, like, the guitar, he just does a lot of different effects with it. And then the lyrics is muffled. It's almost, I think it's looped. I don't know if it's looped or just like an echo. Am I wrong in that?
Yeah, it's definitely affected. I didn't think Alex was going for that. So having a guitar and that's not a guitar, which he carried over into Envy of None. And from the experience from doing his own solo record, he was really trying to sort of play and experiment with guitar textures because Geddy was doing a lot of the other stuff to fill in. So he was more supportive. And then the guitar sound is that sort of disguised, doesn't quite sound like guitar. It's definitely heavily affected. So.
And they weren't using any synth at all in this album. It was all straight up just guitar, bass, and drums. So they had to layer it, make effects out of it, right? So, yeah. Right. So, go ahead, Paul.
The initial version, very, very fuzzy sounding, very, very heavy sounding. That's one difference in the 2013 remix is they cleaned it up a bit. They didn't remove all the effects, but so you can hear the vocals a little bit higher in the mix, and it's subdued slightly musically.
Right. Coming out of the loudness war, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That we brought up last week. So let's hit up the first verse. All this time we're talking and sharing our rational view. A billion other voices are spreading other news. All this time we're living and trying to understand why a billion other choices are making their demands. Initial thoughts on this first verse?
Yeah, it's kind of the lyric of opposites. There's opposite activity happening. There's definitely sort of warring factions, I guess, lyrically, in a sense, pointing out differences between approaches to an event and how it's actually relayed, how the information is shared. That's my sort of 5-cent take on it.
Yeah, we example in the United States, since this is based on September 11th, have our rational view on how we view things, and then this horrible act of terrorism and war happens, and due to someone else's way of looking at their circumstances. So there's a billion different views, a billion different ways to look at it, but just like Rob said, different factions.
I was going to get into this with the music when I still will, but it's really interesting because I draw a lot of ties with this song to Half the World, because, half the world thinks this, half the world thinks that. Now, maybe it's not exactly 50-50 here, but it's an opposing view. And even if I would think anybody getting into Rush in later years, if you just got into them all at once and we're just getting the albums, listening to them, I think that if you didn't even know when Vapor Trails came out or when Peaceable Kingdom came out, I think you could listen to those lyrics and think, I bet this is about 9/11. It isn't that it's so on the nose. It just feels there's a weight to this song musically and lyrically, and even in Geddy's delivery, it's almost he's not the casual observer. He's an observer, but he's saying, look, it's serious, it's bad. It almost takes me back to Grace Under Pressure, where something like Between the Wheels, it wasn't, even though there were some lighthearted moments on that album, you listen to something like Between the Wheels or Red Sector A, there's no fooling around there. He's telling it like it is.
Yep. Agreed. And I
Almost,
don't know.
almost a bit of like a negative, not a negative tone, but more a darker tone, maybe.
Very, very dark.
Foreboding and melancholy.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Paul, you were going to say something, or
Actually, it's about the next set of lyrics, so I'll wait till after we go.
Okay.
The title of the song.
Musically, it's a pretty good driving beat, for the verse, and then it kind of just kind of mellows out a little bit for the pre-chorus, which goes like this: talk of a peaceful kingdom, talk of a time without fear. The ones we wish would listen are never going to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, so Peaceable Kingdom is a series of paintings, over 60 of them, from Pennsylvania Quaker Edward Hicks, done in the 1800s, who made the images the core of his life's work. The theme of the paintings is the message of peace in chapter 11 of Isaiah. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and fatling together, and a child shall lead them. So in the song, Neil talks about, okay, as you can see in the painting there, you've got all the predator and prey peacefully existing, and in the background, I'm gonna get this wrong, it's William Penn with the Quakers and the Lenape, sorry if I got that wrong, Indian tribe. So that's who you have in the background, but they're all peacefully coexisting, and it's something that Hicks felt very passionately about in his paintings, saying that this can happen, but you have to work for it. You have to strive for it. So that in and of itself is a struggle.
It's interesting. I'm just thinking now, and I'm sure here we're all, talking to Rush fans here. I'm sure we got a lot of Star Trek fans here too. There's a title of, am I frozen up?
Nope, you're good.
Nope.
Okay.
We're all good.
I'm pretty sure one of the original series episodes is called "And the Children Will Lead," and I wonder if that's probably the same inspiration. Musically, I want to lead back into Half the World again, because we all know what Half the World sounds like, but it's like down, da, down, down, da, down, down. It's kind of happy, This one is the same rhythm, but it's down, down, down,
Yeah.
like angry. It's like an angry version. This song is like an angry version of Half the World. And then when it switches to Half the World Gives, Half the World Takes, it's a little lighter. Even when this transitions into, Dream of a Peaceable Kingdom, it's a little calmer, but there's still that sense of foreboding. And of course, Awake Towards a Clearing Sky. I mean, this was one of my favorites when Vapor Trails came out, just because it was so heavy, and I loved it. It just rumbles. But lyrically, it's pretty potent. It's a pretty powerful song without, like I said, being too on the nose. It's a lot of artists were inspired by 9/11. I mean, Springsteen. I mean, a lot were. But this was Neil's way, very, very Neil way of doing it without, hey, here's another song about 9/11.
Right.
Right.
And the ones we wish would listen are never going to hear. Going again back to that contradiction, those warring factions.
And it almost, it almost sounds like this could have been on Snakes and Arrows lyrically too.
Agreed.
Obviously, Neil wasn't done with this, and he does that. He's done that. He wasn't done with this lyrical tangent. He said, "I can do more with this." So, yeah, there's a lyric on Snakes and Arrows, and I don't know if it's Armored Sword or not, but it that section makes me think of something on Snakes and Arrows. Somebody out there is screaming at the computer like, "You idiot! You should know what it is."
That's Armored Sword. I know where you're going with it. I don't remember the line, but that is
Voices in the marketplace.
misusing faith as a weapon as opposed to a defense.
Yeah.
I think the bass does a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of setting the mood throughout the song. In the verses, there's a lot of bass chords, which to my ear, when bass chords are played, no matter what the tone of the overall song is, they take up a lot of space. They're very full. You can't miss them. Very grungy. Maybe not used in grunge, but the true adjective grunge.
It's not a clean.
Yes.
It's not a clean tone. It's a dirty tone.
It's very
one note is like it's got grit.
It's very gritty whenever you use bass chords, and that's used all throughout the verses. And as soon as they lighten it up in these pre-choruses, he goes to just a counter melody that he's playing, and it lightens up the whole thing right away just by making that one switch. I think it really does a great job of changing the mood and setting the mood.
And those lyrics in those lighter moments are the solution-based lyrics. Let's talk about a peaceable kingdom. We need to communicate all that. So it fits tonally, it fits perfectly. Good point.
Yeah. Even Getty's tone in this section, the chorus is very up the register, high up the neck, and it's very clean sounding as opposed to what Eric just mentioned. The heaviness is gone. So that upper register really kind of cleans it out.
And then the heaviness returns during the chorus, which goes like this: justice against the hanged man, knight of wands against the hour, swords against the kingdom, time against the tower. With that heavy guitar riff in the background.
So Getty's vocals are heavily like multi-tracked, and like there's a lot of guitar layers, but there's a lot of vocal layers on this album too.
And now we're getting into the tarot of it all. So let me state off the bat, I'm not an expert. I'm not a practitioner. I asked people and I looked things up online. So do not come at me in the comments for being slightly off on some of these relative descriptions. But where are we at? Justice against the hangman. Justice being rightful application of power. Hangman being contemplating indecisive or suspension of progress. So do we act? Do we think about what we're going to do, or do we simply react? Next line, Knight of Wands against the hour. Knight of Wands questing, has an agenda, a lover of action against the hour. In other words, you're going to do something or not. Then swords against the kingdom, swords being a suit in tarot, which signifies rationality, error science against the kingdom being what we've already talked about, and time against the tower. Time being timeliness, that's not a card, but against the tower. The tower is, every song on the Vapor Trails album is assigned a tarot card, and the tower is very rightfully right there. Very rightfully. And that, I do want to note that the ones they use in the artwork, which is what Eric has put up on the screen, though that art was commissioned to Pamela Coleman Smith, a British artist in the 1800s, by Arthur Edward Waite to illustrate the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, also known as the Rider-Waite or the Smith-Waite deck. So that the meaning of the tower is conflict, change. It can mean destruction, depending on the it's all context based, but it definitely means the human-built edifice on fire. So obviously, this would be the card for this song.
Well, the description says misery, distress, indigence, adversity, calamity, disgrace, deception, ruin. It is a card in particular of unforeseen catastrophe.
Exactly.
It's also interesting to note that Neil, the only time I've ever heard Neil directly talk about getting some sort of card reading is in Ghost Rider, when he talks about being on the beach somewhere and he got this reading. He just said, "Oh, what the heck? I'll get a reading," and it was so dead on that it said it rocked his world, because the guy just seemed to know. He said, "You're a performer, you're an actor, musician," and like just seemed to know, just seemed to call out what his personal situation was at that time. So it's interesting to note that the first album back, he had that on the back of his mind to use.
And it's
I
funny
can't
too with
remember
that
where I
he
read it,
actually
but-
had the wherewithal to get a Tarot Cards for Dummies book. So
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yep.
There's a method. There's a method to this guy's madness.
Oh, and it's only after we've taken this long to look back at it that we're still seeing threads, which is pretty amazing. Like the music and the lyrics, it's truly the gift that keeps giving.
And we're learning tarot. So
We are learning tarot, and later on in the Rush canon, tarot is brought up again in the Clockwork Angels novel. When it looks like chapter 6, Owen who's the main character, the protagonist of the Clockwork Angel story, Owen stumbles upon the carnival and the fortune teller, and the fortune teller lays out 4 tarot cards, and it's Justice against the Hangman, it's Knight of Wands against the Hour, it's the Hermit against the Lovers, and the Devil against the Fool, which I suppose would be 8 tarot cards, not 4. But regardless, this is a direct quote of Peaceable Kingdom, and quite naturally, Owen asks, "What does it mean?" Which might be what many people are thinking.
And I think that comes directly from Neil's experience getting that reading done, because I know that when he talks about, what's the ballad on that? What's the ballad on that
Halo
song?
effect.
Halo effect.
Halo effect. He thought maybe he found, someone, but she wasn't the one. Not
All
yet.
a construct in his mind, exactly.
But when I heard those lyrics when Clockwork Angels came out, having read Ghost Rider, I know exactly where that came from. I mean, this is really autobiographical for him.
Yeah.
More than probably he ever said.
Agreed.
So after that chorus, we go back to the second verse, which goes, "All this time we're shuffling and laying out all of our cards, while a billion other dealers are slipping past our guards. All this time we're hoping and praying we all might learn, while a billion other teachers are teaching them how to burn."
That lyric about slipping past their guards, that sends chills up my spine, knowing what it's about.
No matter how prepared you think you are.
Yeah.
While we're trying to predict the future, someone else has plans that, we can't account for everything.
The problem is you're predicting based on the way you think everybody thinks.
Yep.
It sounds very frustrated, sort of like, what's the point? Sort of like a fly on a wheel who says, "Watch me choose my own direction." That kind of thing. Like what's the
Yeah.
point? All this time we're doing all these things, but there's a billion others going directly against it. So what's the point? It sounds very angrily frustrated.
And that's the hanged man, by the way, is contemplating, almost indecisive, that analysis paralysis that can kick in too. It can be interpreted that way. So yeah, he's nailing them all.
Yeah.
And then they continue on with this song had a specific pattern with verse, pre-chorus, and a chorus, and then we repeat it. We go verse, pre-chorus, which goes to "Dream of a peaceful kingdom, dream of a time without war. The ones we wish would hear us have heard it all before." And then he repeats 3 times, "A wave toward the clearing sky."
It's that melancholy coming back again. No matter how much we try and talk, or we think we're being diplomatic or communicating, they're not necessarily hearing it, or we're not saying the right things. The communication isn't there.
Or they're nodding and acting like they hear it, but they're going to go ahead and do what they think is right anyway. It's getting heavy here. We're getting heavy.
Mhm.
Not just musically.
Then we go to the second chorus, which we refer to the tarot cards again. The hermit against the lovers, or the devil against the fool, swords against the kingdom, the wheel against the rules.
Okay, the notes I took for that, hermit is caution, discretion, or inner calm. Lovers are choices to be made using intuition, not intellect. So do you go with your head or do you go with your heart? Devil is shadow, darker side, or dependence. Fool is energy, force, happiness, or optimism. And then swords against the kingdom again. And then as far as the wheel against the rules, the wheel of fortune, which is featured on this shirt, this Vapor Trail shirt, and you see the letters for tarot on it. Wheel of Fortune is karma. What goes around comes around. Adaptability. So it's all these different ways of looking at this.
Yeah.
Kind of an
Anyone
info
else?
dump on that one.
Rob, you want to say something or no?
Yeah, I think the parallels too from coming off of Ghost Rider, some of that residue is kind of bleeding into this song. Maybe a smidge of it, perhaps. Again, the universality of what he writes, trying to not sort of give you a specific thing. You kind of have to interpret, what like this song is about. I like you said before, I think it was Tim that said it before, where when you heard the song, you knew what it was about. It took me a while to figure out, oh, this has got to be about 9/11, and the later lyric kind of confirmed it. So I think just some of the residue of universality is kind of bleeding into this tune from the previous. So the overall sequencing of this tune right after Ghost Rider, and again, it's such a polar opposite. This whole song is complete opposites all the way through. It's so consistent from top to bottom. The musicality, the instrumentation, in this section, the duality that's going on. It's really interesting.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Rob, because it's true with Ghost Rider, because Neil had his own twin tragedies. He had his own personal 9/11 happen. The most devastating thing that could ever happen to one person happened to him on small scale. It's one person, one family, but it's the shrapnel was devastating. And a little bit later in the song, and I know we'll get to it, but "A Homeboard Angel on the Fly," that sounds like a lyric from Ghost Rider.
Very good point out. Yep.
At this point, there's an interlude in the song, but there's no guitar solo, which is kind of one of the rare songs where there's no actual Alex Lifeson guitar solo.
This album was,
yeah. Go, Tim.
This album came out at a time when, guitar solos were poo-pooed for some reason. I think it's the most ridiculous thing, and it was a trend. And even though there are some solos on Vapor Trails, they're more textured. Like any Metallica fans could tell you, Saint Anger did the same thing. It did a lot of things, but one thing, there are no guitar solos. But yeah, that was just a trend that seemed to be going around at the time, and I'm glad he got out of it, because he ended up doing some of his best solos to follow. But at the same time, having been used to these songs how they are, I don't know where he'd stick a guitar solo or what he could play that would be any better than those textures that they're weaving.
It certainly keeps you in the moment. Like it sticks right in the pocket where it's been, and it doesn't take you out of it. It keeps, pushing hard and heavy. And it seems like throughout the entire song, regardless of if there's, actual lyrics going on or not, there's a constant vocal presence of, harmonies and haze and oohs and ahs just going on the entire time, which is really interesting and unique for a Rush song.
That really comes off.
And to Tim's point, where would you put a guitar solo in that? It's already full with all these different sounds and harmonies, and so it makes sense to not include a solo, I suppose, right? Sorry, Rob, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, it's fine. That's cool. And I think even just the Getty faction in this song is like right off of My Favorite Headache. So he was doing all the bass chords, layers of bass. So I think just that approach came into this album, as with Alex, with Victor, and how he was layering his guitars. It just seemed to make sense to them with all the jams they did, that those experiences coalesced into this overall sound that we have.
Yeah, there's a reason the albums came out when they did. Like this album couldn't have come out before Test for Echo. It never would have happened. It had to have come out in its time.
Exactly the point I was going for was Getty doing My Favorite Headache, very melodic, and then Alex kind of getting a real feel for his chops with Victor. Then they come together, and this is the result when you have melody meeting those heavier chops and very confident riffing.
Yeah, very brash, very almost discordant in places, but somehow it works.
They made it work. That's what they do. And then we finished the song with a verse. All this time we're burning like bonfires in the dark. A billion other blazes are shooting off their sparks. Every spark a drifting ember of desire to fall upon the earth and spark another fire, to fall upon the earth and spark another.
Yeah, it's like history repeats itself. Like, don't think this is the last time anything like this will happen because, yeah, wow.
World's still turning. Exactly.
And
also, actually, to go back to Edward Hicks's philosophy, and it does lead us into the next set of lyrics, though, is that there's also the hope that you have to continue to work towards that peaceable kingdom. You can't rest on your laurels. That takes just as much work, if not more, than it does to maintain the warring faction idea. It's striving for that diplomacy or that peace. He doesn't question whether or not it's an achievable goal, but he does sort of hint that this is the way we need to go.
Well said, Paul. There is one thing that I've brought up a couple times before. I can't remember the songs in specific. And I know there's a word for it in poetry, but I haven't stumbled upon it. But how words in certain orders sound good. Where like if you never spoke English, but if you heard, this set of words, you'd be like, oh, that sounds really nice. I think this verse is another great example of that, where even if you did not understand a single word of English, you'd be like, wow, that sounds like poetry. I mean, the way he fits these words together is just amazing, really amazing.
We talked a lot about that during the Roll the Bones roundtables. Back then, I was very studied on that kind of thing, and it's probably stated in those. But he loved prose, so
yeah. Honestly, I had to look I was listening to it, but I had to stop and look at the lyrics to that last line that Getty sings because I didn't know what he was saying. To the first time I heard it, and to this day when I hear it, it still sounds like he's saying something about Aurora Borealis.
I'll have to listen.
Mhm.
Aurora Borealis, da 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 da. Like, it's like what was that? But yeah,
a billion other blazes. Maybe it sounds like, or
yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, that Aurora, I heard Aurora Borealis.
I heard it too. Like what? What is he talking about?
I find he sings some of these verses pretty like at a good tempo. He sings it pretty fast.
It's wordy. It's almost wordy like olden times, like Beneath, Between, and Behind, and songs like that. Like it's if you stumble, if you get like off by half a beat, you're finished.
Mm-hmm.
All this time we're burning like bonfires in the dark. Like it's it's very.
And Tim, you brought up Half the World, and I agree completely on the Half the World thing. I also hear Working Them Angels in that same meter. Maybe that's just where my head goes, but it sounds like it's that same meter.
Slow and heavy. Yeah. This is the heaviest of the three for sure.
Oh yeah.
Like
Half the World's almost like for Test for Echo, I guess it's like politely heavy in places. This is not polite. This song kicks the door down and says, listen to us here. We have something important to say.
That's
half
the tower.
World is half the world is like top 40 heavy, right? It's like radio play heavy, maybe.
Yeah, half the world is like heavy that you'd hear in the supermarket.
Yeah.
You probably won't.
Yeah.
So we go into the outro, the final lyrics: a homeward angel on the fly, a wave towards the clearing sky. A homeward angel on the fly, a wave towards the clearing sky. Then he repeats it, a wave towards the clearing sky. Basically wrapping up how he began.
And again, that hopeful ending, I think that's how I interpret it after all this heaviness. It's like, and in the meantime, life continues to go on. It's whether or not you're going to let it stop you from flying, that's on you.
Yeah. And, when Neil's talking about his, if he's weaving his own tragedies there, is that him, shrugging his shoulders and heading off on his bike again? it could be a lot of things. But the Homeward Angel on the Fly always reminded me of Ghost Rider, the song, and how nothing can stop you now, and it's pretty amazing. I've had a good time just listening to this song, but re-listening to both versions of Vapor Trails, and just I was never one of those people that had any problem with this album. I was colored by the fact I was so glad they were back and doing it again, but I was really enjoying the music too.
And to your point on sequencing that you bring up Ghost Rider into this end up especially ending with those lines leading into How It Is. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I mean, it's almost a concept album in some ways.
Yeah.
Well, even though he specifically said in that he didn't do interviews, but he did a release through Universal, I believe, through UMG.
Yeah.
These were the inspirations for these things and all that's where I found out about Edward Hicks. But he does state, while there's no underlying theme, clearly he uses the tarot theme to keep everything together. We mentioned in the One Little Victory Roundtable that there's constantly revisiting reunification, harmony, dissonance, coming back together. There's still themes. It's sort of like Presto, where they didn't say perception, but
yeah.
It definitely.
That's also quoted in the tour book, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not just a group of 11 songs that they wrote and put on an album. It is 11 intentionally written songs, both in the music and in the lyrics. It's not by chance.
In the order that they are, for a reason. Rush never struck me as the type of band that would put their song titles in a blender and say, "Here's what comes out." It always very, very, very conscious of that. And I wonder about we lost. I happen to have the cassette of this, and it ends in Vapor Trail on side 1, and then side 2 begins with Secret Touch. Most people just think of it as the songs on the CD as they are, but that's how it would have been broken up if it had come out on a standard 2-sided record.
Yeah.
Was this song ever played live? To anyone's knowledge? Not even on the Vapor Trails tour, maybe? No? So many layers, it would be kind of hard to do, maybe?
They did do it on R30, I know that.
No.
Yeah.
I meant to ask this before we started recording so I don't come off as but I figured one of you would know.
This doesn't strike me as a song that
they would play in a show.
They would play in a show, and if you didn't play it they have revived songs that they never played on the original album's tour. But this doesn't strike me as one that would be there'd be the diehards in the crowd that would be losing their minds because they're playing Peaceable Kingdom, but they could be an awful hard song to learn. And, really to do it live, you'd almost need 3 guitars and 2 basses and
that's why I was thinking there's so much
3 Gettys and
this song was assembled in the computer. They made no bones about that. They said that the jam came together, but most of the album was picked apart and pieced together, and this song was one of them. So
right. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
I think
this is one of my personal favorites on the album. Just because it's the behind the lyrics and just musically, it just catches you. It's just so driving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the heaviness of the original release, but the remix I like too. But I love just the heaviness of the song and just the quality of this recording, the original recording. I think marry very well together. So that's my favorite of the 2 versions.
All right. Well, gentlemen, if there's nothing else, thank you very much for your time. Everyone out there, thank you for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. Please click like, subscribe. You can help support us on Ko-fi if you can. Check out our merch shop. We've got plenty of stuff out there. We've got more, roundtables lined up. So we'll keep going down the Vapor Trails rabbit hole, I guess you want to call it. So for all of us here at Rush fans, thanks for your time and have a good night.